Ryan, Ryan, get out of there right now. Can you hear the sirens screaming from the very earth and sky of America? What we are witnessing today are not random acts of nature or mere coincidences in our weather patterns. For decades, we have been told that our world is a stable, predictable place, governed by laws we fully understand. But the reality unfolding around us suggests something far more calculated and ancient. Right now, as the United States navigates the fallout of military strikes against Iran, and our officials warn that potential threats to the homeland can no longer be ignored, a much deeper and more disturbing question is emerging. While the world watches the possibility of a traditional war, a series of unnatural events is taking place within the borders of the United States that defy every standard scientific explanation. From the darkened skies of Texas, where massive swarms of locusts have decimated the land, to the powerful tornadoes tearing through the plains and the blood-red horizons of the West Coast fires, it feels as though a curtain is being pulled back. Some believe these signs were foretold thousands of years ago in ancient texts, intended to wake a nation from its slumber. The tension abroad is undeniable, but the disturbing shifts occurring right here at home suggest that an ancient blueprint is being activated. We no longer have the luxury of time to ignore these occurrences, because while we look for enemies in distant lands, the very foundations of our own country are beginning to shake in ways that suggest we are part of a programmed sequence of events designed to grab our attention before it is too late. The sky, which we have always viewed as a peaceful canopy, is no longer behaving like a natural atmosphere, but rather like a stage where a terrifying drama is being unveiled. Across vast stretches of the country, from the rugged coastlines of Oregon to the rolling hills of the Carolinas, thousands of citizens have captured footage of massive, perfectly symmetrical tube-shaped clouds that seem to defy the laws of fluid dynamics. These are not the wispy cirrus or the puffy cumulus clouds we learned about in school, but heavy, organized structures that stretch for miles with a precision that looks almost manufactured. As these formations drift over residential neighborhoods, they are accompanied by a low, rhythmic humming sound, a vibration so deep and pervasive that it causes window panes to rattle and car alarms to trigger without a physical touch. This is not the sound of wind whistling through trees or the roar of a distant jet engine. It is a mechanical, mournful resonance that people report feeling inside their own rib cages. In the Pacific Northwest and moving toward the east, witnesses describe the air itself feeling charged, as if a massive, invisible machine were operating just behind the veil of the clouds. These tube-like formations do not dissipate like normal weather. They hold their shape for hours, moving with a synchronized wave-like motion that suggests they are being guided by a force that science cannot quite name. This atmospheric disturbance reached a terrifying peak along the western coastline, when a storm formation of unprecedented proportions appeared, stretching over 150 kilometers in length. This was not a typical cold front or a standard supercell, but a massive, twisting cloud structure that took on the unmistakable shape of a dragon rising from the horizon. As the sun set, the cloud was illuminated from within by rhythmic pulses of lightning, but this lightning did not fork or strike the ground in the usual fashion. Instead, it flickered in repeating patterns along the spine of the cloud, creating the visual effect of glowing scales shimmering in the dark. The sheer scale of this formation was enough to stop traffic on major highways as people climbed out of their cars in stunned silence, watching this celestial beast crawl across the sky. The movements of the cloud were slow and deliberate, and as the lightning flashed, a sound began to emanate from the formation that was far removed from the sharp crack of thunder. It was a deep, metallic resonance that many described as the sound of a massive iron door grinding open, or the long, mournful blast of a trumpet. This sound did not just travel through the air. It seemed to originate from the sky itself, echoing across the landscape and staying in the air long after the lightning had faded. When these reports began to flood social media and local news stations, the scientific community was quick to offer standard explanations. But their theories are beginning to fall apart under close scrutiny. Meteorologists have attempted to label these phenomena as atmospheric gravity waves or magnetic resonance, caused by solar flares interacting with the Earth's ionosphere. While these are real scientific terms, they fail to explain the specific, organized, and symbolic nature of what people are seeing and hearing. NBC News and other major outlets have interviewed experts who admit that no known industrial activity or natural geological process can produce sounds with such a low, bone-rattling frequency across an area spanning thousands of miles simultaneously. If this were a simple weather event, the sounds would be localized and chaotic. But these trumpet sounds are reported as being melodic, intentional, and synchronized. Science can explain the mechanics of how sound travels through different air densities, but it cannot explain the will behind the timing of these events. There is no machine on Earth powerful enough to make the entire sky of the United States vibrate with the sound of a metallic horn. And there is no natural atmospheric condition that accidentally forms a 150-kilometer dragon with rhythmic, scale-like lightning. We are being told to trust the data, but the data is failing to account for the sheer impossibility of these occurrences happening all at once. For those who have studied ancient prophecy, these events are not a mystery, but a confirmation of warnings written long ago. The book of Revelation speaks of 7 trumpets that will sound to signal a period of divine judgment and the shaking of the heavens. These trumpets were never described as mere metaphors. They were presented as literal, audible warnings intended to reach every ear on earth. Similarly, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21, verse 25, it is written that there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and that on the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. The appearance of the dragon-like cloud formation carries an even heavier weight, as the dragon is a central symbol in prophetic literature representing a great deceiver or a force of chaos that rises in the end times to challenge the order of creation. These ancient texts suggest that before the ultimate transition of human history, the physical world will begin to respond to the spiritual tension of the era. The sky is behaving exactly as the prophets predicted, not as a backdrop, but as a messenger. The fact that these trumpets are being heard now, at a time of peak global instability and domestic fear, suggests that the stage is being set for something far greater than a mere weather cycle. We must confront the reality that the sky is no longer a source of comfort or a predictable roof over our heads. It has become a massive, glowing screen, displaying signs that we are being forced to watch. When you hear a sound that vibrates the very bones in your body and see shapes in the clouds that mirror ancient warnings of judgment, you have to ask yourself, is it really just the wind? Is it just atmospheric gravity waves that happen to sound like a call to assembly? We are witnessing the sky act as a curtain that is slowly being drawn back, revealing that the normal life we have known is an illusion that is rapidly dissolving. The fear that people feel when they see these things is not an irrational panic. It is a primal recognition that the world is changing at a fundamental level. You are not just seeing clouds and hearing noise. You are witnessing a deliberate communication from a power that operates far beyond the reach of human technology or political authority. The question is no longer whether these events are happening. The evidence is in the thousands of videos and the millions of ears that have heard the sound. The only question that remains is whether you will continue to believe the random explanations of a failing scientific narrative, or if you will recognize that the sky itself is screaming at us to wake up before the next phase of this ancient design begins. It is clear that the events described, such as the sudden appearance of massive sinkholes and the unexpected behavior of water levels in reservoirs, can create a profound sense of unease. When the very ground beneath people's feet or the water systems they rely on behave in unpredictable ways, it is a very natural human response to feel a sense of alarm and to look for broader patterns or significant meanings behind these occurrences. This feeling of vulnerability often leads to a search for a deeper narrative to explain why such disruptive events happen. However, from a geological and scientific perspective, these phenomena are understood as being rooted in specific, localized physical processes, rather than as part of a synchronized or programmed sequence. For example, the sinkholes in Florida and Texas are well-documented characteristics of karst topography. This occurs when acidic groundwater slowly dissolves soluble bedrock like limestone or salt over thousands of years, eventually creating underground voids that can no longer support the weight of the surface. While the collapse feels sudden and unannounced to those on top, it is typically the final stage of a long-term geological cycle. Similarly, unexpected changes in water levels, such as those observed at Lake Oroville, are often the focus of intense study by hydrologists and civil engineers. These changes are usually attributed to complex interactions between subterranean aquifer pressure, local seismic activity, and the immense weight that large bodies of water place on the surrounding crust. While these events are dramatic and can certainly be frightening, there is a high degree of uncertainty in linking them as part of a single, coordinated global design. Scientists generally view these incidents as isolated geological events, occurring within their own unique environmental contexts. Focusing on the science of geophysics or the history of environmental monitoring can offer a different, reality-grounded perspective on these shifts. Many people find it helpful to learn about the technology used to track ground stability or the engineering efforts aimed at protecting infrastructure, as these fields provide a way to understand the Earth's natural changes through measurable data. Exploring how various cultures have interpreted natural disasters throughout history can also provide a broader view of how humanity has always sought to find meaning during times of environmental instability. While the earth beneath our feet is crumbling and the sky above is shouting with metallic voices. The third great pillar of our physical reality, the ocean, has begun to undergo a transformation that is perhaps the most unsettling of all. The sea has always been regarded as the cradle of life and the ultimate regulator of our planet. But across the vast coastlines of the United States, that cradle is rapidly turning into a massive, silent graveyard. From the rocky shores of the Pacific to the sandy reaches of the Atlantic, witnesses are reporting a sight that defies modern precedent as millions upon millions of marine creatures are being expelled from the depths. Fish, crabs, starfish, and deep-sea organisms that rarely see the sun are washing up in heaps that stretch for hundreds of yards, creating a thick carpet of lifelessness on our beaches. This is not just a localized environmental mishap. It is a widespread phenomenon that is producing a suffocating stench of decay, a smell of death that is so heavy it can be detected miles inland, invading residential neighborhoods and forcing people to seal their windows. Witnesses describe the scene as profoundly haunting, as if the ocean itself is no longer able to sustain the very life it was designed to protect. Parallel to this mass mortality, the waters along the West Coast have begun to exhibit a violent and unexplained behavior that has caught coastal authorities completely off guard. Without the presence of any offshore storms, tropical depressions, or underwater seismic activity, massive rogue waves reaching heights of 20 feet or more are slamming into seawalls and overflowing coastal boundaries. These waves do not arrive with the warning of a darkening sky or the wind of a hurricane. They emerge from a seemingly calm horizon with a terrifying, steady force that carries enough energy to sweep away vehicles and inundate entire seaside streets in minutes. Even more disturbing are the reports from those standing on cliffs who have observed the surface of the ocean appearing to boil from within. This is not the churning caused by wind, but a thick, milky white foam rising from the depths, as if the very chemistry of the water is being agitated by a force moving beneath the crust. Human defenses, which were engineered to withstand the most extreme predicted weather events of the century, are being bypassed and crushed by an ocean that has suddenly decided to ignore its traditional limits. The scientific community has scrambled to find a narrative that fits within the boundaries of conventional ecology, but their explanations are increasingly seen as inadequate attempts to mask a much deeper crisis. The Los Angeles Times and other major publications have cited experts who point toward hypoxia, a condition where ocean temperatures rise and oxygen levels collapse, causing marine life to suffocate and drift to the shore in a desperate search for air. Others have tried to explain the massive 20-foot swells as long-period wave energy that traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific. While these terms describe the physical mechanics of water and biology, they fail to answer the most critical question: why is this energy accumulating and striking with such synchronized intensity right now? Why are these events occurring simultaneously across multiple coastlines that have stood firm for centuries? Science can label the symptoms, but it cannot explain why the ocean's immune system seems to be failing all at once, or why the energy of the deep is being released without a visible trigger. The official explanations treat these as isolated environmental data points. But to the average person standing on a beach covered in dead stars, it feels like the ocean is trying to tell us that the biological and physical laws we once relied upon have been suspended. For those who view the world through a spiritual and prophetic lens, these aquatic horrors are a direct echo of ancient warnings that were intended to signal a time of universal upheaval. The prophet Hosea, in chapter 4, verse 3, warned of a time when the land would mourn and all its inhabitants would languish, specifically stating that even the fish of the sea are being swept away. This was not written as a commentary on industrial pollution or climate change, but as a spiritual indicator that the balance of creation had been severely disturbed. Furthermore, the words of Jesus in Luke 21:25 describe a period where there will be distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. The use of the word perplexity is vital here. It describes a state of being completely at a loss for an explanation. We are living in that state of perplexity right now, watching the roaring of the sea manifest as rogue waves and boiling foam, while our greatest scientific minds struggle to provide a reason that satisfies the soul. These texts suggest that the ocean is the first great mirror of the state of the world. And if the sea is falling into a state of death and chaos, it is a sign that the very life force of the planet is being withdrawn. We are forced to confront a terrifying possibility: that the ocean is not just reacting to external changes, but is actively preparing for something much larger. If the ocean, which covers 70% of our planet and provides the very breath we take, has become a graveyard, then the safety we feel in our coastal cities is nothing more than a fragile delusion. The strength of the water is beginning to exceed every barrier man has ever built, and the silence of the millions of creatures dying in the surf is a loud, ringing alarm, and that something fundamental in the structure of our world has broken. We must ask ourselves if this sudden retreat of life and the aggressive surge of the waves are the final warning shots of a creation that is no longer willing to tolerate the path of humanity. Are the oceans retreating only to gather strength for a final, overwhelming strike that will reshape the map of our world? The barriers are failing, life is fading, and the sea is gumroo with a message that we are no longer in control of the elements. We are standing on the edge of a great transition, and the ocean is the first to testify that the old world is passing away. While the foundations of our coastal cities are being tested by the rising tide of death in the ocean, the interior of the American heartland and the peaks of our mountains are witnessing a paradox of destruction that feels like a direct assault on our survival. In the agricultural corridors of Texas and Oklahoma, the horizon, which should be golden with the promise of harvest, has been replaced by a moving, breathing cloud of brown haze. Massive swarms of locusts have descended with a density estimated at an incredible 160 million insects per square mile. A number so vast that it literally blots out the sun and turns midday into a haunting twilight. These are not merely seasonal pests. They are a living carpet of consumption that can strip an entire field of corn or wheat down to the bare stalks in just a few hours. Farmers describe the sound of their approach as a low, ominous roar, like a distant freight train, followed by the terrifying rhythmic clicking of millions of mandibles devouring the very food supply of the nation. As these swarms move through the plains, they leave behind a landscape that looks as if it has been scorched by an invisible fire, turning the breadbasket of America into a barren wasteland. This is a targeted strike on our food security, a clear signal that the natural systems we rely on to feed ourselves have turned hostile, moving with a predatory intelligence that science is struggling to categorize. This agricultural nightmare is being mirrored by a terrifying elemental war taking place on the West Coast, where the very air is being twisted into weapons of flame. In California, the traditional wildfire season has escalated into something far more demonic, as witnesses have captured footage of massive fire tornadoes, vortices of pure flame reaching heights of over 50 meters, screaming through the ancient forests. These firenadoes are not just intense heat. They are self-sustaining weather systems of fire that generate their own winds, lifting heavy debris and even vehicles into the air and hurling them across the landscape like burning missiles. But the true terror lies in the geographical paradox occurring at the exact same moment. While the southern parts of the state are being incinerated by record-breaking heat and swirling pillars of fire, the northern Sierras and even the tropical peaks of Hawaii are being buried under a sudden, crushing weight of record-breaking snow. Along Interstate 80, the primary artery of the West, the scene has turned into a post-apocalyptic graveyard as thousands of travelers were forced to abandon their cars in the face of a whiteout that appeared without warning. Vehicles sit half-buried in drifts, their headlights frozen in time, looking like a scene from a movie where humanity simply disappeared. This is the divided house of nature, a world where you can stand in the path of a fire whirlwind in one county and be frozen to death in a blizzard in the next, all within the same 24-hour cycle. The scientific establishment has attempted to provide a linguistic shield for these events, using terms like weather backlash to describe the violent whiplash between extremes. Data from the Texas Department of Agriculture and reports from USA Today suggest that these are the results of unprecedented atmospheric pressure shifts, where the moisture from extreme floods is being instantly sucked out by flash droughts, creating a perfect storm for insect breeding and fire intensity. However, the scientific narrative fails to account for the impossibility of these extremes coexisting in such close proximity and with such surgical timing. Never in modern meteorological history have we seen fire tornadoes and Arctic blizzards paralyzing the same regions simultaneously. To call this a backlash is to use a clinical term for what is clearly a total systemic collapse. Science is observing the symptoms of a world that is no longer functioning according to the laws of the last 10,000 years. We are witnessing the breakdown of the Goldilocks zone, that stable environment that allowed human civilization to flourish. When drought, flood, fire, and ice all strike the same ground at the same time, the label of climate change feels insufficient. It feels like a deliberate dismantling of the habitable world, a dismantling that is happening too fast for any human agency to stop. This atmospheric civil war is a vivid manifestation of the archetypal plagues described in ancient scripture, specifically those intended to humble the greatest empires of history. In the book of Exodus, chapter 10, verse 14, the locust plague is presented as a singular event of judgment, where the insects covered the face of the whole land so that it was darkened, and they ate every plant in the land. This ancient record is no longer a story from a Sunday school book. It is a live report from the fields of Texas. Furthermore, the prophet Isaiah described a time when the Lord would come with fire and with his chariots like a whirlwind, a description that perfectly matches the 50-meter fire tornadoes currently terrifying the West. Even the sudden, crushing snow finds its place in the ancient warnings. In the book of Job, chapter 37, verses 9 and 10, it is written that the tempest comes from its chamber, the cold from the driving winds. The breath of God produces ice, and the broad waters become frozen. These texts suggest that when nature moves in these extreme, contradictory ways, using both fire and ice to restrain the movements of man, it is because the Creator is using the elements to bring the pride of a nation to a standstill. The reality we must face is that nature is now divided against itself, and in that division, humanity is being crushed. We are watching the total collapse of the ecological and agricultural systems that have sustained our modern life. When the ocean dies, the sky screams, and the land is simultaneously burned and frozen. We are seeing a creation that is no longer in harmony with its inhabitants. We are small, fragile, and utterly helpless in the face of fire tornadoes that we cannot extinguish and insect swarms that we cannot poison. Our food lines are being severed, our transport arteries are being frozen, and our forests are being turned into pillars of flame. This is not a series of environmental challenges to be solved by policy. It is a systemic erasure of our comfort and safety. The fear rising in the hearts of the American people is the realization that we are no longer the masters of our domain. We are guests who have overstayed our welcome, and the house itself is trying to expel us through every element at its disposal. If the very ground, water, and air are at war, where can we turn? The paradox of fire and ice is a final warning that the balance has been lost, and the time for arrogance has ended. The ecosystem is not just changing. It is screaming at us that the end of the world, as we knew it, has already arrived. As the terrifying paradox of fire and ice paralyzes our cities and consumes our fields, a final layer of this unfolding judgment has moved from the surface of the earth into the deep cosmos, signaling that the time for localized explanations has ended. In the dark hours of the night, residents across major American cities have begun to witness a phenomenon that defies the standard laws of meteorology. Strange, rhythmic pulses of purple and blue light have been captured by security cameras and smartphones, appearing not as flashes of lightning, but as steady, eerie glows that seem to emanate from the atmosphere itself. There is no thunder to accompany these lights, only a heavy silence that precedes a shift in the very heavens. Shortly after these celestial displays, the moon has been seen rising over the landmarks of our power. From the skyscrapers of Chicago to the monuments of Washington, D.C., but it no longer carries its familiar pale glow. Instead, it has been transformed into a deep, bruised crimson, a blood-red sphere that hangs in the sky like a silent witness to the chaos below. Before the witnesses can even process the sight of a blood moon hovering over the seat of our government, the earth itself begins to respond. Seismic tremors, once thought to be a concern only for the West Coast, are now rattling the foundations of high-rise buildings and cracking the pavement in regions where earthquakes are almost unheard of. The scientific establishment, represented by outlets like AP News, has been quick to provide clinical reasons for these terrifying sights, suggesting that the red color of the moon is merely the result of wildfire smoke or atmospheric dust refracting sunlight during a lunar eclipse. They claim the blue and purple lights are nothing more than earthquake lights caused by the friction of rocks under intense stress or perhaps rare electrical discharges in the upper atmosphere. While these individual explanations may hold some weight in a laboratory, they utterly fail to account for the convergence of these events. Science can explain why a moon turns red, and science can explain how a fault line slips, but it cannot explain why the sky turns purple, the moon turns to blood, and the earth begins to shake all in the same window of time. Echoing sounds of trumpets and plagues of insects. The statistical impossibility of these events occurring simultaneously across the entire continent suggests that we are not looking at a series of independent accidents, but at a coordinated celestial and geological verdict. We are seeing a convergence of signs where every element of our reality, the ground, the sea, the sky, and the stars, is speaking the same language of warning at the very same time. For those who understand the ancient warnings, this convergence is the unmistakable signature of a divine timeline reaching its crescendo. The prophet Joel, in chapter 2, verse 31, specifically foretold that the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. This is not a vague poetic metaphor. It is a literal description of the visual reality currently being documented on our city streets. When we see the moon turn to blood over the very buildings where our leaders make their decisions, we are seeing a sign that the authority of man is being weighed against a higher law. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 8, Jesus describes such a gathering of global disturbances as the beginning of birth pains. Just as birth pains increase in frequency and intensity until the moment of delivery, these signs in our oceans, our mountains, our fields, and our skies are accelerating. The tremors under our feet and the blood in the sky are telling us that the delivery of a new era is at hand, and the old foundations of our civilization can no longer hold back the pressure of what is coming. Looking back at everything we have witnessed, the picture is both clear and terrifying. We have seen massive swarms of locusts in Texas devouring the food supply of a nation, mimicking the ancient plagues of Egypt. We have seen the earth open up in Florida and Texas, swallowing homes as if the ground itself were hungry for judgment. We have watched our oceans turn into silent graveyards as millions of creatures perish, and we have felt the bone-rattling roar of rogue waves hitting our shores without a storm in sight. We have witnessed the impossible paradox of fire tornadoes incinerating the West, while record-breaking blizzards bury our mountains and tropical peaks. And we have heard the mournful metallic sounds of trumpets echoing from a sky filled with dragon-shaped clouds and blood-red moons. Science has tried to give these things names: hypoxia, karst topography, weather backlash, and atmospheric refraction. But those names are merely labels on the jars of a house that is currently on fire. Science tells us the how, but the ancient scriptures tell us the why. We are witnessing a systemic awakening of the planet, a programmed sequence designed to shatter our complacency and force us to look upward. The question you must ask yourself right now is one that transcends politics, economics, or scientific theory. Between the shaking earth and the screaming sky, where is your foundation? For years, we have lived in the comfort of our routines, trusting that the grocery stores would always be full, the ground would always be solid, and the sky would always be silent. But that illusion of stability has been stripped away. You are witnessing the collapse of the normal. No, and it is happening in real time. Are you going to continue to sleep in the cradle of self-satisfaction, believing the lie that things will eventually go back to the way they were? Or will you lift your head and realize that the clock of human history has entered its final hour? These signs were not sent to entertain or to be studied as curiosities. They were sent as a final alarm for a nation and a world that has forgotten its creator. When the foundations are destroyed, the only thing that remains is your spiritual standing. We cannot stop the fire tornadoes with our hands. We cannot silence the trumpets in the sky with our technology. And we cannot command the blood moon to fade. But we can choose how we respond to the one who controls these elements. There is only one refuge left when the world becomes unstable. And that is a return to the one who set the boundaries of the sea and the foundations of the earth. We must recognize that these events are an act of mercy before they become an act of total judgment. They are a call to wake up, to repent, and to align ourselves with the truth before the door is finally shut. The safety of the world is gone, but the safety of God is still available to those who seek it. I am calling on every person watching this, no matter where you are or what you believe, to take a moment of absolute stillness. Look at the world around you and admit that something is fundamentally different. Do not let this moment pass by without a response. I urge you to bow your head right now and leave a short prayer in the comments. This is not for me, but as a public testimony of your faith and your need for divine protection. Ask God for forgiveness for our nation. Ask for His mercy over your family. And ask for the strength to stand firm as the world continues to shake. Let the comment section become an altar of prayer where we collectively ask for help in this hour of darkness. Do not let the door close before you have made your peace with the one who holds the stars in His hands. Thank you for watching, for staying alert, and for choosing to see the truth rather than the distraction. Please share this video immediately with those you care about. It is no longer just a video. It is a siren for those who are still asleep. We must act as watchmen for one another, because the time for later has run out. Stay connected, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay in prayer. Understanding always begins before fulfillment. And now that you understand, the responsibility to act is yours. May God have mercy on us all, and may He find us awake and ready for what comes next.